You are not family. Madame Kang set down her jade chopsticks and looked directly at Yejide, not with anger, not with heat, but with the kind of cold, surgical contempt that only old money knows how to serve alongside a 12-course meal. 17 family members sat around the table. Handmade Celadon plates, Wagyu galbi that cost more per pound than most people's rent, a centerpiece of white orchids flown in from Jeju Island that morning. And Madame Kang, 68 years old, dripping in Mikomoto pearls, spine straight enough to cut glass, had just said the quiet part out loud. Yejide's hand moved to her belly. 7 months pregnant, her second child with King Sunwoo. The man sitting at the head of this table, the man who ran a $2.3 billion construction empire by day and something far more dangerous by night. The man who had begged Yejide to come to this dinner even though every instinct in her body had screamed no. Grandmother. Everyone turned. Duri, 5 years old, 4 feet tall, her mother's warm brown skin and her father's razor-sharp eyes, pushed her chair back from the table. The legs scraped against the marble floor. The sound cut through the silence like a knife through silk. She stood up on her chair, and she said 3 words. Okay, hold on, besties. I need you to breathe because this story right here is going to have you pacing around your living room at 2 in the morning. If you love family drama, dark romance, and little girls who don't know how to back down, hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell right now. Drop a crown in the comments if you're already Team Duri. Now, let's get into it. Let me take you back. 6 years before that dinner. Seoul, South Korea. Gangnam District. The kind of neighborhood where the buildings are made of glass and ambition, and the cars parked outside cost more than houses back in Atlanta. Yejide Mitchell, 26 years old at the time, had just stepped off a 14-hour flight from Hartsfield-Jackson with 2 oversized suitcases, a laptop full of architectural blueprints, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from being the youngest person to ever graduate summa cum laude from the Georgia Institute of Technology's School of Architecture. Her parents, Dr. Clarence Mitchell and Dr. Lorraine Mitchell, Nigerian-American professors who taught at Morehouse and Spelman, respectively. They had named their daughter Yejide, a Yoruba name meaning image of her mother, because they believed in giving their children roots that stretched across oceans. They raised Yejide on James Baldwin, jollof rice arguments at Thanksgiving, and the unshakable belief that a Black woman with a plan is the most powerful force on earth. They weren't wrong. Yejide had been hired by Kang Construction Group to design their new international headquarters, a 62-story tower in Yongsan that would redefine the Seoul skyline. The project was worth $340 million. Yejide's firm back in Atlanta had submitted the winning bid, and the client had specifically requested her. The client was King Sunwoo. Now, let me tell you about Sunwoo. Kang Sunwoo was 35 years old, 6'1", built like he lived in the gym, but moved like he'd been raised in a temple. His name, Sunwoo, means mild and friendly in Korean. The irony was not lost on anyone who knew what he did after dark. He had this face, sharp jaw, dark eyes that could go from warm to absolutely terrifying in the space of a heartbeat. He wore Tom Ford suits that cost $15,000 and had hands that were always clean, even though everyone in Seoul knew what those hands were capable of. On paper, CEO of Kang Construction Group, one of the top 5 construction conglomerates in South Korea. They'd built hospitals, bridges, government buildings, a wing of the National Museum. Off paper, Sunwoo controlled the Kang crime family, the
the most powerful organized syndicate in Seoul's underground. They ran protection, logistics, and had politicians on speed dial. Sunwoo's father had built the empire. His mother, Madame Kang, had kept it pristine. And Sunwoo had inherited it all at 27, when his father died of a heart attack at a poker table in Macau, holding a winning hand. Sunwoo was the kind of man who could walk into a room of 50 armed men and not raise his voice once. He didn't need to. When Kang Sunwoo spoke, people listened. When he was silent, people listened harder. And then he met Yejide. She walked into the first design meeting 45 minutes early because her mother always said, if you're on time, you're late, and found Sunwoo sitting alone in the conference room reading her proposal. Not skimming it, reading it. He had a pen in his hand and he'd written notes in the margins, in English. You understood the structural analysis on page 47, Yejide said, setting down her bag. Not a question. Sunwoo looked up. You used a modified Verandel frame. It's elegant, but expensive. It's right. He almost smiled. Almost. That was the beginning. Over 7 months of construction meetings, late-night blueprint revisions, arguments about load-bearing walls that somehow turned into conversations about their childhoods, and one very memorable evening when the power went out in the Kang Group offices during a monsoon, and Sunwoo produced 2 flashlights and a thermos of his grandmother's ginger tea, something shifted. Sunwoo fell first. He'll never admit it, but everyone in the Kang compound saw it. The way his eyes would track Yejide across a room. The way he started showing up to meetings in person instead of sending his VP. The way he learned the word y'all and used it wrong for 3 months straight. Yejide fell second, but when she fell completely. They married in a private ceremony on Nami Island. Cherry blossoms, 20 guests. Yejide wore a custom hanbok designed by a Seoul atelier in ivory and gold, and Sunwoo cried, the only time any of his men had ever seen him cry. 1 year later, Duri was born. And Madame Kang? She didn't come to the wedding. She didn't come to the hospital. She sent a gift, a silver spoon engraved with the Kang family crest, and a note that read simply, for the child. Not for my grandchild. For the child. That was 6 years ago, and nothing had changed. Until tonight. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday in early March.
Yejide was standing in the kitchen of their Hanamdong home, a 4-story modernist house that she had designed herself, thank you very much, making tteokbokki for Duri's after-school snack. She'd learned the recipe from their housekeeper, Mrs. Park, and had since modified it with a touch of cayenne and smoked paprika because, as Yejide told Sunwoo, Korean spicy is beautiful, but it hasn't met Atlanta spicy yet. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy linen paper, hand-calligraphed in black ink, the Kang family seal pressed into burgundy wax on the back. Yejide didn't need to open it to know who it was from. She opened it anyway. A family dinner, she read aloud, hosted by Madame Kang Soo-yeon, Saturday evening. The Kang estate, Pyeongchang-dong. She turned the card over. On the back, in smaller script, in celebration of family unity and the coming new year. Family unity, Yejide repeated, tasting the words like bad medicine. Duri appeared in the doorway. She was wearing her school uniform, the navy blazer from Seoul International Academy, white socks pulled up to her knees, and she had paint on her nose, green paint. She'd been working on a self-portrait in art class that looked, generously, like a very confident potato with braids. Mommy, what's that? An invitation from Hanmuni. Duri's face did something complicated. At 5, she had already developed an emotional vocabulary that most adults would envy. She knew that Halmoni was her grandmother. She knew that Halmoni lived in a very big house with very quiet rooms. She knew that Halmoni sent birthday presents that were always expensive and never warm.
Last year, a strand of children's pearls, with no card. Is Harmony being nice now? Duri asked. Yejide knelt down and wiped the green paint off Duri's nose with her thumb. I don't know, baby, but we're going to find out. Sunwoo came home at 8 that night. He walked through the front door the way he always did, coat off, shoes lined up perfectly by the entrance, keys in the ceramic bowl that Duri had made in preschool. It was shaped like a lopsided frog, and it was his most prized possession. His security team, 2 men who stood like shadows, stationed themselves outside. Yejide was on the couch in the living room, her feet up, a pillow behind her lower back. At 7 months, the baby had settled low and heavy, and her back ached constantly. She was reading a Korean architecture journal and had a bowl of tangerines beside her. Sunwoo knelt by the couch and pressed his lips to her belly. He did this every night. It was the first thing he did. Before he said hello to her, before he ate, before he checked his phone. Belly first, always. He's kicking, Yejide said. She, Sunwoo corrected. We don't know that. I know. He looked up at her with those dark eyes and almost smiled. Almost. Sunwoo's almost smiles were worth more than most men's grand declarations. Your mother sent an invitation. The almost smile disappeared. Sunwoo stood. He took off his tie, Hermes, navy blue, $280, and draped it over the back of a chair with the careful precision of a man who controlled every detail of his life. What kind of invitation? A family dinner, Saturday, the estate. No. Sunwoo.
No. His voice didn't rise. It never did, but the temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. She hasn't spoken to you in 2 years, Yejide. She didn't come to Duri's birthday. She didn't call when you were hospitalized in January. I know. And now suddenly she wants family unity? I know what she is, Sunwoo. Yejide sat up slowly, one hand on her belly. I've known since the day she looked at my engagement ring and asked if it was costume jewelry. I know. But Duri asks about her every week. When can we visit Harmony? Does Harmony like my drawings? She's 5, and she's already learning that half of her family doesn't want her. Sunwoo went very still. I'm not going for your mother, Yejide continued. I'm going for our daughter, and I'm going because I'm Yejide Mitchell King, and I have never, not once, backed down from a table I was invited to sit at. Sunwoo looked at her for a long time. Then he crossed the room, sat beside her on the couch, and took her hand. If she says one word, I can handle your mother. I know you can. That's what worries me. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about what I'll do. Yejide leaned into him. He smelled like sandalwood and the cold, souled night, and something underneath that was just him. We go together. We eat her food. We let Duri see her grandmother. And if things go wrong, we leave. And if I lose my temper? Sunwoo, you run the most dangerous organization in Seoul. You sit across from men who want you dead, and you ate their food and smile. You can survive dinner with your mother. He pressed his lips to her temple. My mother is scarier than any of them. Yejide left. The baby kicked. They went to dinner. The days leading up to Saturday moved like honey. Slow, thick, sweet in some moments, and suffocating in others. On Wednesday, Yejide had her 32-week checkup at Samsung Medical Center. Dr. Yoon, a tiny woman with giant glasses and a no-nonsense attitude, told her the baby was healthy, positioned well, and measuring slightly large. He takes after his father, Yejide said. She corrected, smiling. Not you too. The baby was fine, blood pressure was fine, iron levels were fine. Everything was fine. Yejide sat in the car afterwards, in the back of the armored Hyundai Genesis that Sunwoo insisted she ride in, and tried to believe that Saturday would be fine too. On Thursday, Duri came home from school with a drawing. It was the family. She'd drawn Yejide, tall and brown, with a big round belly, Sunwoo in a black suit with what were either shoulders or wings, A baby in Yejide's stomach that looked like a smiling circle, and off to the side, smaller, but definitely there, a figure in a hanbok. "That's Halmani. She's watching us," Duri said, pointing. "Why is she over there by herself, baby?" She considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Because she hasn't come close yet, but maybe she will." Yejide put that drawing on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like the Korean flag. It stayed there all week. On Friday night, Yejide stood in her closet for 45 minutes trying to decide what to wear. This was not vanity. This was strategy. She chose a custom Carolina Herrera wrap dress in deep emerald green, the kind of dress that said, "I am expensive, I am elegant, and I did not come here to play." It accommodated her belly beautifully. She paired it with gold earrings her mother had given her for her 30th birthday. Small, delicate hoops that had belonged to her grandmother before that. Her hair was in fresh goddess locks, pulled back in a low bun with 2 tendrils framing her face. Sunwoo watched her get ready from the bedroom doorway. He was already dressed, a black Brunello Cucinelli suit, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone. He looked like the cover of a magazine, a dangerous magazine. "You look," he started. "I know." She turned and kissed him. "Let's go to war." Long rectangular space with a table that could seat 24. Tonight, it seated 17. The table was set with heirloom china, white with a blue crane pattern, each plate worth more than Yejide's first car. And the food was already laid out in the traditional Korean style. Dozens of banchan dishes surrounding a centerpiece of kalbi jjim braised short ribs, japchae noodles glistening with sesame, a whole steamed fish with ginger and scallion, kimchi jjigae bubbling in stone pots, and a tower of perfectly arranged fruit for dessert. Someone had spent 2 days preparing this meal. Yejide respected the effort, even as she suspected the motivation. The family was already seated. At the far end of the table, Madame Kang. She wore a silk hanbok in deep navy, almost black, with silver embroidery along the collar. Her hair was pulled into a perfect chignon. Her face was porcelain and unreadable. She wore a single piece of jewelry, a jade pendant that had belonged to her mother-in-law and her mother-in-law before that. It was worth, by most estimates, around $180,000. She wore it the way other people wear reading glasses. To her right, Kang En-ji, Madame Kang's younger sister, 63. Same bone structure, same cold eyes, same ability to make "how are you" sound like a threat assessment. She was the one who, at Yejide and Sunwoo's wedding announcement, had said in Korean, assuming Yejide couldn't understand, "Is he collecting strays now?" Yejide had understood. Yejide always understood more than they assumed. To Madame Kang's left, Kang Min-soo, Sunwoo's uncle, 65, a retired judge who now spent his time managing the family's real estate portfolio and saying absolutely nothing of substance. He was the kind of man who had survived decades in a powerful family by developing the remarkable ability to be invisible while sitting right in front of you. Scattered along the table, 2 of Sunwoo's cousins, Kang Yuna, 30, who worked in the family business and had once, secretly, told Yejide that her kimchi fried rice was actually incredible when no one else was listening. And Kang Hyun-woo, 28, who was studying abroad in London and had been pulled back for this dinner like a reluctant fish on a line. He looked uncomfortable. Good. There were also 2 family advisors, a distant relative who managed the Kang Foundation, and assorted spouses who sat with the practiced blankness of people who had learned long ago not to have opinions at this table. 17 people. 17 sets of eyes that turned to the doorway when Yejide, Sunwoo, and Duri walked in. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that you can feel pressing against your eardrums. And then Duri's sparkle shoes lit up, blink, 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 as she took her first step into the room, and the silence cracked just a fraction. "안녕하세요." Duri announced to the entire table, bowing with her hands clasped in front of her exactly the way Mrs. Park had taught her. Hello. Her Korean was bright and clear and perfect. Nobody responded for a beat too long. Then Yuna, God bless her, smiled and said, 안녕, Duri야, 예쁘다. Hello, Duri, you look pretty. Duri beamed. 감사합니다, Yuna 언니. Thank you, Yuna 언니.
Sunwoo guided them to their seats. He had positioned himself between Yejide and his mother, a human wall in a Brunello Cucinelli suit. Duri sat beside Yejide, booster seat on the chair, sparkle shoes dangling. Madame Kang looked at her son. Sunwoo ya, you came. Her voice was smooth and cold, like river stones in winter. You invited us, mother? I invited family. The word landed like a slap. Sunwoo's jaw tightened. Yejide's hand found his thigh under the table and pressed. A silent message. Not yet. Let it play. Madame Kang turned to Yejide. She let her eyes travel slowly, from Yejide's face to her belly to her dress to her earrings and back up. It was the kind of look that inventoried and dismissed simultaneously. Yejide-si, you look well. Thank you, Omanim, Yejide replied, using the Korean honorific for mother-in-law. Her pronunciation was careful, respectful, flawless. She had practiced it in the car. Thank you for the invitation. The table is beautiful. Madame Kang's left eyebrow moved a millimeter. The Korean had surprised her. Good. Shall we eat? Madame Kang said, and it was not a question. The first 40 minutes of dinner were a masterclass in politeness as violence. Everything Madame Kang said was technically courteous and absolutely lethal. When Yejide complimented the Golbi Jim, Madame Kang said, yes, it's a family recipe, passed down from mother to daughter for 4 generations. Of course, you wouldn't know it. When Duri tried to use her chopsticks, she was still learning, gripping them a little too high, the way kids do. Aunt Unji murmured, just loud enough, the child holds them like a foreigner. When the subject of Yejide's architecture came up, Yuna had bravely asked about a new project. Madame Kang interrupted to say, Sunwoo's late father always said that the Kang group should be run by Kangs, but things change, I suppose. Each comment was a paper cut, small, precise, designed to bleed slowly. Yejide took every single one with a straight spine and a steady voice. She complimented the food again. She asked about Uncle Minsu's garden. She had heard he grew prize-winning chrysanthemums. She translated a joke Duri made about the fish having a grumpy face into Korean for the table, earning a surprise laugh from Hyunwoo. She was magnificent. And she was exhausted. Sunwoo was a coiled spring. Yejide could feel it, the tension radiating from his body like heat from an engine. Every time his mother landed a barb, his hand tightened around his chopsticks. His men were stationed outside. One word from him, and this dinner would end in ways that Madame Kang couldn't imagine. But Yejide had asked him to be patient, so he was patient for her. The 41st minute is when everything changed. It started with dessert. Mrs. Cho, the Kang family's housekeeper of 30 years, brought out a traditional Korean rice cake platter, songpyeon, yakshik, and patbingsu arranged on a tiered ceramic stand. Alongside it, she set down a second platter, sweet potato cake, Duri's favorite, shaped into little flowers. Oh! Duri bounced in her seat. Mrs. Cho made my good cakes. Flower cakes. Mrs. Cho, a round, warm woman who had known Sunwoo since he was in diapers, smiled at Duri with genuine affection. She bowed slightly and retreated to the kitchen. Madame Kang watched this exchange with narrowed eyes. Then she set down her teacup and turned to Sunwoo.
Sunwoo-ya, I have something to discuss. A family matter. She glanced at Yejide. A private family matter, perhaps. Yejide is family. Mother. Speak. Madame Kang's jaw tightened. She reached beneath the table and produced a large cream envelope, heavy, embossed with the Kang family crest. She slid it across the table toward Sunwoo.
Open it. Sunwoo looked at his mother, then at the envelope. He opened it. Inside were documents. Legal documents. Yejide could see the header from where she sat, the logo of one of Seoul's most prestigious law firms, and beneath it, dense paragraphs of Korean legal text. Sunwoo's face changed. In 6 years of marriage, Yejide had learned to read her husband the way she read architectural blueprints, by looking at the structures underneath. And right now, underneath the calm exterior, something tectonic was shifting. What is this? His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. A petition, Madam Kang said, lifting her tea, supported by the family council. It proposes a formal restructuring of the Kang family trust and inheritance line. She sipped. Specifically, it recommends that any future heir to the Kang estate must be of verified full Korean descent, and that existing arrangements be reconsidered. The room went silent. Yejide felt the blood drain from her face. She understood. She understood completely. This dinner wasn't a peace offering. It wasn't reconciliation. It was an ambush. Madam Kang was trying to disinherit Duri and their unborn child. "You're trying to cut my children out of the family," Sunwoo said. The words came out flat, factual, like he was confirming the time. "I'm trying to protect the family," Madam Kang corrected. "The Kang bloodline has been unbroken for 11 generations, Sunwoo. 11. Your father would—" "My father adored Yejide. Your father was sentimental. My father was right. Your father is dead." Madam Kang's voice cracked like a whip. The room flinched. Even Aunt Unji looked down at her plate. I will not watch everything this family has built be diluted, be weakened, be what, Mother?" Sunwoo leaned forward. "Choose your next word very carefully." The air in the room was combustible. 17 people held their breath. Yuna was gripping the edge of the table. Hyunmoo was staring at a fixed point on the wall. Uncle Minsu had achieved a new level of invisibility. Yuna had stopped eating her flour cakes. Her dark eyes, sharp like her father's, were moving back and forth between her grandmother and her parents. She was 5. She didn't understand inheritance law or family trusts or bloodline politics, but she understood this. Someone was trying to hurt her mom and dad. Yejide placed her hand on Sunwoo's arm. He was trembling, not for fear, never for fear, but with the kind of volcanic anger that the most controlled men carry when the people they love are threatened. "Sunwoo," Yejide said. Her voice was steady, impossibly steady, for a woman who had just been told in front of 17 people that her children were not worthy of their own name. "Let me see the documents." He handed them to her. Yejide read. She read every line, every clause, every legal mechanism. Her Korean wasn't perfect, but she had spent 2 years working with Korean legal contracts for the Kang Group headquarters project. She knew this language. She knew these structures. And then she started to laugh.
"어머님," Yejide said, setting the documents down. "These are very thorough. Your lawyers are expensive. But I should tell you, the Kang Family Trust was restructured in 2019 when Sunwoo became chairman. Under the current charter, which I personally reviewed during the Kang Group headquarters project, any amendment to the inheritance line requires the unanimous consent of the sitting chairman and all registered beneficiaries." She paused. "Duri is a registered beneficiary. She has been since the day she was born. So these documents," she tapped the papers gently, "they're beautiful stationery and nothing more." Madam Kang's face went white. Aunt Unji's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Yuna, across the table, covered her mouth with her napkin, but Yejide could see her eyes smiling above it. Sunwoo looked at his wife with an expression that was part shock, part awe, and entirely love. "You knew," he murmured. "I always read the fine print, baby. I'm an architect. Details are literally my job." For exactly 4 seconds, Yejide thought the worst was over. She thought that Madame Kong would fold, that the legal gambit had failed, and they could finish their dessert and go home, and she could take a hot bath and rub cocoa butter on her belly and forget this night ever happened. She was wrong. Because Madame Kong did not fold, Madame Kong had not survived 40 years as the matriarch of a crime family by folding. She got cruel. Madame Kong stood. When Madame Kong Suyon stood up at a table, it was not a casual movement. It was a coronation in reverse. Every person in the room straightened, spines aligned, hands went still. Even the candles on the table seemed to stand at attention. She looked at Yejide, and for the first time all evening, the mask came off entirely. "You think you're clever," she said, not in English, in Korean. Fast, fluent Korean, the kind designed to exclude, to remind Yejide that no matter how many contracts she'd read, this was not her language, not her country, not her family. You walked into our world 6 years ago with your blueprints and your smile, and you ensnared my son, and I watched. I watched him change. I watched him abandon the marriage arrangement I spent 3 years negotiating with the Yoon family. Judge Yoon's daughter, Sunwoo, you remember her? Perfect family, perfect bloodline. She waited for you. Sunwoo's jaw hardened. I never agreed to that arrangement, mother. You know that. Because you were already distracted. Madame Kong turned back to Yejide, and now her voice was rising, not to a shout, never a shout. Madame Kong didn't shout, but to a register that filled every corner of the room like ice water. Do you know what I sacrificed for this family? My husband died at 59, heart attack. The stress of running an empire, both empires, killed him. And I held everything together. I kept the business running, I kept the family council in line, I kept our name, clean and respected and feared in every boardroom and every back alley in Seoul for 30 years.
And then you appeared. And now my son has a wife who can't hold chopsticks properly at a formal dinner. I can hold chopsticks fine, 어머님, Yejide said, her voice even. Duri's the one learning. A wife who speaks Korean like a textbook, not like a person. I speak Korean well enough to read your lawyer's documents. And children who will grow up belonging to neither world. That word again, belonging. Madame Kong wielded it like a weapon, as if belonging were something she controlled, something she could grant or withhold from the lock on her treasury. Aunt Unji saw her moment. She had been sitting in her sister's shadow all evening, and now she leaned forward with the careful precision of a woman who had rehearsed this. Because she had, Yejide realized it suddenly, with a chill. This wasn't just Madame Kong's ambush. Unji had helped plan it. If I may, Unji said, folding her hands on the table with practiced elegance, Sunwoo, your mother is trying to protect you. All of us are. You don't see it because, forgive me, because love makes you blind. But the rest of us see clearly. The Yoon family still asks about you, you know. Judge Yoon's daughter married someone else, but she's divorced now. These things can be corrected. The audacity of that sentence, corrected, as if Yejide and Duri and the baby were a clerical error, made Yejide's hands go cold. Aunt Unji, Sunwoo, said, and his voice was so quiet that everyone leaned forward to hear it. The voice that reminded everyone that CEO and crime boss occupied the same body. If you finish that sentence, you will never speak at a Kong family table again. And I mean that in every way you can imagine. The room understood. They always understood when Sunwoo used that voice. The voice that reminded everyone that CEO and crime boss occupied the same body. If you finish that sentence, you will never speak at a Kong family table again. And I mean that in every way you can imagine. The room understood. They always understood when Sunwoo used that voice. The voice that reminded everyone that CEO and crime boss occupied the same body. Unji closed her mouth. But the damage was done. The cruelty was a coordinated effort now.
mother and sister, a united front of rejection. And Yejide was sitting at this beautiful table, surrounded by exquisite food and expensive china. And she had never felt more alone in a room full of people. Except she wasn't alone. Because Yuna, quiet, careful Yuna, who had always been the one sympathetic face at family events, spoke. This is wrong. Every head turned. Yuna was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white, her eyes red. She was shaking. She was terrified. She was 30 years old, and she had never, not once, contradicted Madame Kang at a family gathering, but she was doing it now. Unni, what Yejide did for this family, the headquarters building alone brought in $47 million in international contracts last year. She redesigned the Kang Foundation Children's Hospital wing pro bono. She's incredible. And Duri is the best thing that's happened to this family in a decade. She's the only one of us who makes grandfather's portrait in the hallway look like it's smiling. She's perfect, and I'm tired of pretending she isn't. The silence after Yuna's outburst was different from the other silences. It was charged, electric. Sunwoo was staring at his cousin with something that looked like awe and fear in equal measure. One of the family advisors had quietly pushed his chair back from the table, as if preparing for an exit. Madame Kang looked at Yuna. The look could have frozen the Han River in July.
Yunaya, she said, and the way she said it made the name sound like a warning. You forget yourself. Ani oimo, Yuna's frightened. I think I'm finally remembering. Madame Kang dismissed her niece with a turn of her head, a gesture so practiced, so regal, so utterly devastating that Yuna physically flinched. Then Madame Kang focused all of her attention back on Yejide. You think because you built a building, you belong here. You think because my son, my foolish, lovesick son, put a ring on your finger, you are a Kang. You are not a Kang. You will never be a Kang. Your children. She gestured at Duri, and Yejide felt something primal and protective rear up in her chest like a lioness. Your children are a mistake that my son made because he was young and infatuated with something exotic. The word exotic, igukjugin, landed on the table like a grenade. Sunwoo began to rise from his chair. Yejide pressed his arm down, hard. Let her finish, Yejide whispered in English. I need her to finish. Madame Kang continued, emboldened. She was a woman who had held her tongue for 6 years, and now the dam was breaking. When Sunwoo's father was alive, he warned me. He said, the boy will bring home something that will destroy us. I thought he meant a rival, an enemy. I never thought he meant... She looked at Yejide, up and down again, but this time with no pretense of courtesy. This. This. That was the word. Not her, not Yejide's name, not even his wife. This. As if Yejide were an object, a stain, a problem to be removed. The table was frozen. Aunt Unji was nodding, small, sharp nods of agreement. Uncle Minsu was staring at his hands. Hyunwoo looked physically ill. Yuna had tears streaming down her face, but she was sitting up straight. She had said her piece. She didn't regret it. And Duri, little Duri, was watching everything. Yejide could feel her daughter's gaze, heavy, questioning. Duri didn't understand all the Korean words, but she understood tone. She understood that her grandmother was pointing at her mother with contempt. She understood that nobody at this table was stopping it. Almost nobody. Mother? Sunwoo's voice cut through the room like a blade drawn from a sheath. He was standing now. Yejide couldn't hold him down anymore. He rose slowly, deliberately, and the room shrank around him.
Sit down, Sunwoo. No. That single syllable carried the weight of a man who controlled 500 soldiers, 12 city blocks, and a legitimate construction empire. A man who had never, not once in his adult life, been told, sit down, and obeyed. You invited us here tonight, Sunwoo said, not to celebrate family, not for unity. You invited us here to humiliate my wife in front of your audience. He gestured at the table. These people, your sister, your brother-in-law, your advisors, they're not guests, they're witnesses. You wanted Yejide to sit here and absorb your cruelty while the family watched, so that later, when you file those worthless documents, you could say that even Yejide knew she didn't belong, that she sat there and took it. Madam King said nothing. But you made a miscalculation, Mother. You assumed Yejide would be passive. You assumed she would cry or leave or let me fight for her. You don't know my wife at all.
He turned to Yejide. His eyes, those dark, terrifying, beautiful eyes, softened. Yejide, you don't have to stay. Say the word and we leave. Yejide looked at her husband. She looked at Madame Kong. She looked at the 17 faces around this table, some hostile, some sympathetic, all watching. She thought about leaving. She thought about taking Duri and walking out into the cold, soul night and never coming back to this house, with its 12-foot walls and its 11 generations of portraits and its cold, beautiful rooms. But then she thought about her mother, Dr. Lorraine Mitchell, who had marched in every protest that mattered, who had taught Yejide at age 8 that a queen doesn't flee the board, she commands it, who had sent Yejide off to Seoul with a jar of shea butter, a bottle of hot sauce, and the words, "Baby, they're going to test you. Let them. And when they're done, show them what Mitchell women are made of." Yejide stood up. At 7 months pregnant, standing from a low chair required engineering. She placed one hand on the table, one hand on the arm of the chair, and rose with a grace that defied gravity and biology. Her emerald dress caught the candlelight. Her grandmother's gold earrings glinted. Her belly preceded her like a declaration. "Emonim," Yejide said. Her voice was calm, warm even, as if she were addressing a colleague in a design meeting. "I've listened to everything you've said tonight. I've listened for 6 years, actually, through the silences and the snubs and the gifts without cards, and the family events I wasn't invited to and the Korean words you say behind my back that you think I don't understand." She paused. The room was a vacuum. "I understand more than you think. I understand that black woman. 그 흑인 여자. I understand she doesn't belong. 그녀는 여기 사람이 아니에요. I understand 외국 피." Each Korean phrase landed with surgical precision. Aunt Unji had gone pale. I understood all of it, every time, and I chose grace, every time, because my mother taught me that dignity is not the absence of anger. It's the decision to use it wisely. Yejide took a step closer to Madame Kong. Not aggressive, not timid, just closer. "You said my children are a mistake. I want you to look at Duri." She turned and every eye in the room followed her gaze to the little girl sitting at the table in her mint green hanbok and sparkle shoes. "Look at her. She speaks 2 languages. She can name every painting in the National Museum, your late husband's favorite museum, by the way. She draws family pictures that include you every single time because she loves you. Despite everything, she loves you. And you call her a mistake?" Madame Kong's throat moved. A swallow, the tiniest crack in the foundation. "And this baby?" Yejide placed both hands on her belly. "This baby will be born into a family of architects and professors and, yes, crime bosses, who also happen to build hospitals. This baby will be brilliant and beautiful and loved. And you can either be part of that, or you can sit in this museum of a house with your jade pendant and your pedigree and your empty rooms and wonder what it's like to hold your grandchild."
She straightened her shoulders. "But here's what you will not do, 어머님. You will not erase me. I designed the building that bears your family's name. The 62-story tower in Yongsan, every beam, every window, every structural calculation, that was me. The Kong legacy, the one the whole world sees, I built that. Literally. So when you say I'm not a Kong,
I want you to look at the Seoul skyline and remember who put your name on it. The silence was absolute. Sunwoo was looking at Yejide like she had just rearranged the constellations. Yuna was sobbing, not quietly anymore, openly, her whole body shaking with the relief of watching someone say everything she had been feeling for years. Hyunwoo had both hands flat on the table. He was nodding, slowly, deliberately, the kind of nod that said, "I see you, I hear you, I am on your side." Aunt Unji was gripping her chopsticks so hard they were bending. Her face was the color of old parchment. Uncle Minsu, invisible, silent Uncle Minsu, whispered, barely audibly, "She's right, Suyeon." Every person at that table heard it. The invisible man had spoken. And the words carried weight precisely because they came from a man who never spent them. Madame Kong's mouth trembled, but she was a fortress. Fortresses don't fall from one siege. "Pretty words," she said, and her voice was steady again. Almost. "Pretty words from a pretty foreigner, but words don't make blood. Words don't make tradition. You can build 1,000 buildings with our name on it, and it won't change what your children are." She looked at Duri again, that dismissive, categorizing look, like she was appraising an object and finding it lacking. "Mixed, neither here nor there, 어디에도 속하지 않는, belonging nowhere." The words hit Yejide like a fist. She felt them in her chest, in her belly, in the place where her unborn child floated in warmth and safety and had no idea that their own grandmother had just declared them homeless in their own family. Yejide opened her mouth, but before she could speak, before Sunwoo could move, before anyone at that table could draw breath, a small voice spoke. "She's my mom." 3 words. Duri was standing on her chair. She had climbed up, sparkle shoes on the upholstered seat, one hand on the table's edge for balance, and she was looking directly at her grandmother. Not up at her, because the chair made her tall enough to meet Madame Kong's eyes at exactly the same level. And those eyes, Sunwoo's eyes, sharp and dark and fierce, set in Yejide's warm, round face, were burning. "She's my mom." She said it again, not louder, not angry, with the quiet, absolute certainty of a child stating something so fundamentally true that it requires no evidence, no argument, no legal document. The sky is blue. Water is wet. She's my mom. The table was paralyzed. Madame Kong stared at her granddaughter, this tiny person, 4 feet tall in sparkle shoes, paint still faintly visible under her fingernails from Thursday's art class, staring back at her with a composure that grown men in business meetings had never achieved. "Duria."
No. Duri shook her head. Her braids swung. "You said mean things to my mommy, and my mommy is nice. She makes me tteokbokki with special spicy. She reads me stories in English and Korean. She sings me songs. She has a baby in her tummy, and she still carries me when I'm tired." Her lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry. She was a Kang. She was a Mitchell. She did not break. "And she always draws you in our family pictures, even when you don't come see us, even when you don't call on my birthday." She reached into the pocket of her hanbok, the little hidden pocket that the atelier had sewn in at Duri's specific request because she liked to carry important things, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it on the table. It was the drawing from Thursday. The family. Yejide, tall and brown and pregnant. Sunwoo in his black suit with shoulder wings. The baby, a smiling circle. And Madame Kang, off to the side, smaller, but there, watching. "See?" Duri pointed. "That's you, Halmoni! I put you in, because you're family." She looked up at Madame Kang. "Why don't you put us in?" The question floated in the air like a soap bubble. Fragile, iridescent, impossible to ignore. And something happened that no one at that table had ever witnessed before. Madame Kang Sion's eyes filled with tears. Not one tear, not a delicate, cinematic glistening. Real tears. The kind that come from somewhere deep and locked and long forgotten. They spilled down her porcelain cheeks and landed on the cream linen tablecloth, darkening the fabric in small, imperfect circles. She looked at the drawing, at the little figure, off to the side, at the 5-year-old girl, standing on a chair in sparkle shoes, holding out a piece of paper like it was a peace treaty. "Turia!" Her voice broke. The fortress crumbled. 40 years of walls, tradition, pride, grief for her dead husband, fear of change, fear of loss, fear of a world she didn't understand where her son loved a woman who looked nothing like her. All of it came down in the space of a breath. She reached out. Her hand, thin, veined, trembling, adorned with jade, reached toward the drawing. She touched it with her fingertips, gently, like it was made of something precious. Then she looked at Yejide. For the first time in 6 years, Madame Kang looked at Yejide, not through her, not past her, not at her dress or her belly or her skin. She looked at her eyes. And she saw what Sunwoo had seen in that conference room all those years ago. A woman who was brilliant and kind and strong and who loved her son and her granddaughter with a fierceness that matched Madame Kang's own. Madame Kang's voice was small. "I was afraid." The confession fell on the table like a glass dropping. "I was afraid that if the family changed, if we became something different, we would disappear. That everything my husband built, everything I protected, would be gone." She pressed her hand to her chest. The jade pendant rose and fell with her breathing. "But I think I was wrong about what disappearing means." She looked at the drawing again, at the little figure, her, standing apart. "I think I've been the one disappearing." Sunwoo sat back down, slowly. His face was unreadable, but his hand, under the table, was gripping Yejide's so tightly she could feel his pulse.
Duri, still standing on her chair, reached her arms out toward her grandmother.
"Hamoni! Anato! Hug me."
Madame Kang stood. She walked around the table, past Aunt Unji, who looked stunned, past Uncle Minsu, who had tears in his own eyes, past the advisors and the distant relatives, and the practiced blankness of people who were witnessing something they'd never expected to see. She reached Duri, and she picked her up off the chair, carefully, gently, like she was holding something both fragile and impossibly strong, and she held her. Duri wrapped her small arms around her grandmother's neck. Her sparkle shoes dangled. The light blinked against the silk of Madame Kang's navy hanbok. "You're in the picture, Halmoni. You were always in the picture." Madame Kang closed her eyes. She held her granddaughter, and she wept. Across the table, Yuna was sobbing openly. Hyunwoo had his face in his hands. Aunt Unji was staring at the scene like someone had rearranged the furniture in a room she'd known her whole life, and she couldn't find the door. And Yejide, 7 months pregnant, in her emerald dress, grandmother's gold earrings catching the candlelight, sat at that table and felt something she hadn't expected to feel tonight. Hope. Not the loud, triumphant kind, the quiet kind. The kind that blooms in the space between what was and what could be.
The kind that starts with a 5-year-old in sparkle shoes who simply refused to accept that love needed a bloodline to be valid. Sunwoo pressed his lips to Yejide's temple. "You were extraordinary tonight," he murmured. "Duri was extraordinary. She gets it from you. She gets it from both of us." He pulled back and looked at her, and he smiled. Not almost. A full, real, devastating smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look for just a moment like the young man who had said "y'all" wrong for 3 months and didn't care. "Let's go home." "Not yet." Yejide nodded toward the other end of the table, where Madame Kong was still holding Duri, and Duri was telling her about the grumpy fish from dinner, and Madame Kong was, impossibly, laughing. Sunwoo blinked. "You're giving my mother grace? After everything she said tonight?" Yejide shrugged. "I'm an architect, Sunwoo. I don't demolish structures that can be renovated." The drive home was quiet. Seoul at night was a river of light, neon signs in Hangul, the glow of convenience stores on every corner, the distant silhouette of Namsan Tower lit up in pale blue against the February sky. Yejide watched it all from the back seat of the armored Genesis, her hand resting on her belly, Duri asleep against her side. Duri had fallen asleep in the car within 3 minutes of leaving the estate. She was still wearing her mint green hanbok. One sparkle shoe had fallen off and was sitting on the car floor, blinking at no one. Sunwoo drove. He didn't usually. He had drivers, security teams, a whole infrastructure of people whose job it was to keep him insulated from the mundane. But tonight, he drove. Windows down an inch, cold March air threading through the car, his left hand on the wheel, his right hand on Yejide's knee. They didn't speak for 12 minutes. They didn't need to. When they pulled into the garage of their Hanamdong home, Sunwoo turned off the engine and sat for a moment. "She kept the drawing," he said. "What?" "My mother. When we left, she folded Duri's drawing and put it in her handbag sleeve. I saw her." Yejide closed her eyes. She felt the baby shift, a slow, rolling movement, like turning over in sleep. "Good." "Yejide?" "I'm sorry. For tonight, for all of it. For every dinner I didn't fight harder, every holiday I let pass, every—" "Stop." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "You married me knowing what your family would say. You chose me every single day for 6 years. You put our daughter's frog bowl by the front door because it's your most prized possession. You kiss my belly before you kiss me every night, which, by the way, I notice, and it's the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me, including the literal proposal on Nami Island." She touched his face. "You don't owe me an apology, Sunwoo. You owe me a foot rub. I was in heels for 4 hours while 7 months pregnant." He laughed. Low, warm, genuine. A sound that his business associates would not have believed him capable of producing. "I'll carry Duri," he said. He lifted their daughter from the back seat like she weighed nothing. She stirred, murmured something in Korean about sparkle shoes, and burrowed into his shoulder. Her one remaining shoe blinked against his Brunello Cucinelli jacket, and he didn't care at all. They went inside. The house was warm. Mrs. Park had left the hallway light on and a pot of ginger tea on the warmer. Yejide poured herself a cup and stood in the kitchen looking at the refrigerator. Duri's family drawing was still there, the one with Yejide and Sunwoo and the baby and Madame Kang off to the side. But now there was a space, a new space, where Madame Kang's little figure might step closer. Yejide sipped her tea. The baby kicked. "Come on, little one," she whispered to her belly, in English, because some things are best said in your mother's tongue. "You've got a big family waiting for you. It's messy and complicated, and some of them are going to say the wrong thing for a while, but they'll come around. They always do." She finished her tea, rinsed the cup, and went upstairs. Sunwoo had put Duri to bed. She was in her room painted lilac because she'd insisted, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and a framed photo beside her bed of the three of them at Everland theme park, Duri on Sunwoo's shoulders, all of them laughing, cotton candy stuck to his suit. He was sitting on the edge of Duri's bed, watching her sleep. The hallway light made his silhouette look enormous, but his hand, resting on Duri's back, was impossibly gentle. "She asked me something," Sunwoo said, in the car, before she fell asleep. "What?" "She asked if Halmoni would come to her next birthday." Yejide leaned against the doorframe. "What did you tell her?" "I told her yes." "And will she?" Sunwoo was quiet for a moment. "I think, after tonight, yes, I think she will."
Later, after Yejide had taken her bath, after Sunwoo had rubbed cocoa butter on her belly with the same focus he applied to reading architectural blueprints, after they'd lain in bed and talked about baby names, Yejide wanted Seo-jun if it was a boy, Sunwoo wanted Amara if it was a girl. "It means grace in Igbo," he said, and Yejide had stared at him and said, "When did you learn that?" And he said, "I read," which was the most Sunwoo answer possible. Later, Yejide's phone buzzed. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. It was a photo, Duri's drawing, the family picture, smoothed out on what looked like a dark wooden table. Beside it, a cup of tea and a celadon cup. And below the photo, a message in Korean. 어머니가 되는 것이 무섭지 않았나요? Were you not afraid to become a mother? Yejide stared at the message. Her heart was beating very fast. She typed back, in Korean, carefully. 매일 무서워요. 하지만 사랑이 두려움보다 큽니다. I'm afraid every day. But love is bigger than fear. 3 dots appeared. Then, 두리가 그린 그림. 나를 넣어 주었네요. The drawing Duri made. She included me. Yejide typed. 항상 넣었어요, 어머님. 항상. A long pause. Then, 감사합니다, Yejide 씨. Thank you, Yejide. And then, after a pause so long Yejide thought the conversation was over, 다음에는 더 가까이 앉을게요. Next time, I'll sit closer. Yejide put down her phone. She pressed her face into the pillow and breathed. The baby turned inside her, slow and warm and real. Sunwoo, half asleep beside her, murmured, "Who was that?" "Your mother." "Your mother texted you." "She texted me." "What did she say?" "She said, next time she'll sit closer." Sunwoo was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled Yejide against him, gently, carefully, one arm over her belly, his chin on her shoulder, and pressed his lips to the back of her neck. "I married the most extraordinary woman in the world. You married the only woman who could outread your lawyers and outcook your housekeeper. That too." Yejide smiled in the dark. Outside, Seoul hummed its midnight hum. Traffic and neon, and a million lives intersecting. Inside, the house was warm. Duri was dreaming in her lilac room, the baby was turning, and somewhere in Pyeongchangdong, in a very big house with very quiet rooms, Madame Kang was sitting at a table, looking at a child's drawing, learning, slowly, imperfectly, painfully, how to step closer.
If this story found its way to your heart today, if little duties standing on that chair made you believe that the smallest voice in the room can be the most powerful one, then hit subscribe because this is just the beginning. Because here's the thing, besties, that text message, that wasn't the end. That was the door opening. What happens when Madame Kang shows up to the hospital when the new baby is born and discovers a secret that Sunwoo has been keeping from everyone, including Yejide? What happens when the rival family that wants the Kang Empire finds out that Sunwoo's heart has a weakness and her name is Yejide? Like this video if you need part 2 immediately. Comment more if you're addicted. And comment where you're watching from. I want to know which country team Duri has the most fans in.
See you in the next story, besties. Stand tall, stay together, and never let them see you break.